Contemporary tensions, Enlightenment and Romanticism, the acquisition of knowledge, and social ruin in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Frankenstein is widely accepted as a novel which condemns the man who plays God. It is thought that Shelley criticised the over-ambition of human scientific development, a conclusion which is strengthened by Shelley's contemporaries and closed social spheres of romantics. Indeed, at the novel's inception, Shelley was with these friends surrounded by inspiring scenes of nature in Switzerland. Surely, therefore, the novel champions romantic ideals over those of the preceding era of Enlightenment? Perhaps the answer to this is not so simple. In this presentation, we will explore the contemporary tensions between Enlightenment thinking and Romanticism and how these tensions sculpt Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I will propose the interpretations of Frankenstein that we are all familiar with, that all the destruction and ruin in the novel is the fault of man, are not truly reflective of Shelley's deeper explorations. Shelley doesn't solely condemn the science and rationality of Enlightenment while praising Romanticism. Her commentary is more nuanced. As Daniel Panker suggests, Shelley was not arguing for or against science. I would add to Panker and instead propose Shelley is more concerned with the concept of ruin and argues for and against the roles of man and nature in this destruction. To explore Shelley's attitudes and commentary on Enlightenment and Romanticism, however, we must first have an understanding of what these two movements were about. The Age of Enlightenment was a period between 1660 and the early 19th century. Also known as the Age of Reason, the movement revolved around the supposed central importance of reason and rationality. However, a misconception with Enlightenment thinking is that it disregarded humane elements of life. This was not the case, as the movement strove for many forms of social justice for women, class, and political freedom. It just did so in a way which centralized thinking rather than feeling. It is often wrongly believed too that Romanticism appeared in opposition to Enlightenment. Rather than in conflict, Romanticism formed a response to the social climate of thought and reason. It championed feeling, emotion, and sensibility rather than logic, utilitarianism, and rationalism. Yet, where it overlaps is it too strived for justice, but did so in an impassioned, imaginative, and artistic way. So, now that we know of the two conflicting contemporary schools of thought that surround Frankenstein's inception, we can begin to explore how Shelley's commentaries of them emerge in the text. Although we have established the distinctions between Enlightenment and Romanticism were not as clear-cut as often believed, there were still some notable areas of conflict and tension, in particular surrounding the acquisition of knowledge. Enlightenment thinking prioritized human advancement and exploration and testing of the boundaries of knowledge. Romanticism, on the other hand, found a beauty in innocence and ignorance, and valued the natural instinct, imagination, and emotion above all forms of education. These distinctions and tensions are what Shelley uses to sculpt the characters of Frankenstein. Looking at two extracts, we can begin to see the parallels between Enlightenment thinking and Victor, as well as those between romantic thinking, or rather feeling, and the creature. Focusing on the theme of the acquisition of knowledge, this extract provides an insight to the origins of Victor's thinking, which leads to the creation of his monster. Harking back to our earlier description of Enlightenment, I'd like to draw attention to Victor's language and what it suggests of knowledge. The descriptions of fortifications and impediments allude to the earlier presented idea of boundaries of knowledge. Enlightenment thinking was concerned with these boundaries, wishing to go beyond them. Victor's language embodies a sentiment of contempt for imposed limits to man's knowledge. The suggestion of these boundaries preventing an understanding of the citadel of nature introduces our concern of the contemporary tensions between Enlightenment and Romanticism. In Victor's journey for the acquisition of knowledge, he pushes against the idea of the abstract citadel of nature. In a way which he reflects is rashly and ignorantly, through which Shelley comments on the narcissism or self-importance of man. In this next extract, we have the equivalent stage in the creature's journey for acquiring knowledge as we saw for Victor. Where Victor recounted the origins of his thought, the creature tells here the origin of his understanding of the world, or as Victor put it, an understanding of the citadel of nature which surrounds man yet seems so far out of his reach. The creature seems to face none of these fortifications or impediments that man encounters, however. It is in this difference we can read the creature as the embodiment of romanticism. Whilst Victor is concerned with science and pushing at the limits imposed upon man, the creature revels in the beauty of nature and solely explores to find his place in this magnificent grand scheme of life that he finds himself brought into. Victor, as enlightenment, challenges restraints of knowledge. The creature, as romanticism, lives in innocence and ignorance, only knowing the sun as a radiant form and only knowing day, night and food. It is also interesting noting Shelley's use of language in this extract, as the creature expresses the sun enlightened his path. This use of enlightened as a verb subverts its significance as a noun to describe the era of thinking, which produces a different alignment for the creature, and by extension romantic thought, alongside the acquisition of knowledge. Victor's source of inspiration is to do something never done before, to expand the abilities of man, but the creature's source of inspiration is nature. So, what is the impact of these contemporary tensions on the message of the text? As aforementioned, I challenge the idea that the conflict between enlightenment and romantic thinking serves only to criticize scientific development and rationality of the age of reason. Instead, Shelley explores a deeper social issue of chaos and destruction. Though the Enlightenment thinking that Victor embodies creates and abandons the monster, the romantic ideals which the creature embodies drive him into despair and rage. It is easy to see Shelley's critique of Enlightenment thinking embodied by Victor through all he does in the text. However, buried within the novel is a possible critique of romanticism too. Living without rationality and allowing emotion to overcome and control you is not simply praised by Shelley. Social ruin can be brought about by overambitious narcissism, yet it can also emerge in the wake of overwrought emotion and powerlessness. Therefore, with the existence of these tensions in her novel, Shelley leaves it up to the reader to decide which causes the greatest social ruin, when we attempt to defy or submit to our nature.